All right. We are live, and just to make sure, I'm going to click on my stream here. Yep, I see us. Make sure I've muted my stream so I don't hear me coming back through my mic. There we go. All right, so here we are with the second episode of RPG Character Talks, and with me I've got Matt Barty, and we're going to talk about Old Soong. A little bit about what RPG Character Talks is and how it works is it basically gives people a chance to share one of their favorite characters as either an NPC or a PC. We talk about that, kind of who that character is, how you might play that character, so that if you want to grab this character and put it into your own game, you can. And then we'll take a break, come back, and do a little RP session where you get to see that character being played either as an NPC or as a PC. And I am very fortunate that I actually get to play in the session, and Matt is going to run a session where Soong is the NPC that we meet. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Matt is a longtime friend of mine. Matter of fact, most of my DMing experience and game mastering stems from all the games we played back in the late '80s, early '90s together. So happy to have him as my first real guest, because this is the second episode, but the first one was just me talking to myself. So uh, here we are. There's we're going to talk about Soong. So give us a little bit of background, Matt. Who is Soong, and how did this character come about?
Oh, so I can't imagine what future guests might put you through, but I'm definitely going to give you a run for your money here. Let's consider this a marathon, not a sprint. And the reason I say that is because Soong was conceptualized all the way back in, like, I think it was maybe 88 or 89. Uh, and this character has stuck with me uh, for the entire time. So we're talking, we're talking like 25, 30 years now or whatever. So yeah, so Soong was conceptualized in his pre-conception, I guess it would be. A good friend of mine got out of gaming and handed me a big box of his miniatures. And this box had a bunch of the original run of the Grenadier orcs. At the time, I wasn't really much of a miniature player, but it was a nice gesture, so I took them. And then a couple of months later, happened to be at a mutual friend of yours and mine, James, aka Grim. And you guys asked me to run a little impromptu game, and we just kind of threw things down on the kitchen table and went for it. And I didn't have anything prepped at the time, and didn't really know where to start. Was kind of like looking around the table for inspiration, and I just kind of randomly pulled a monster out of that box of miniatures, and it happened to be one of those orcs. And the entire game kind of spawned out of this inspiration I had by I was just looking at this miniature and thinking, I'm not just going to put my friends and like drop them into this encounter with this single orc. That's not interesting. It's not compelling in any way. I want to do something different. And so this miniature became this orc shaman named Wardar, and the player characters, your character and James's character, were traveling down the road, and suddenly from the bushes exploded this naked, massive naked orc. Um, Sprints across the road, grins a big toothy grin at you with his tusks out, and leaps into the river on the other side of the road. And and I was so delighted to see, like, kind of like the how puzzled the two of you were. And you followed him to the river, and he comes out of the river holding this giant river turtle over his head, and he slams it down on the bank, and he screams, "Food, food, food!" And so it turns out this like entire one shot that we did was based around this like NPC orc Wardar, and it was a blast. We had a lot of fun, and it kind of lodged the idea of orcs, not half orcs, because at the time this was AD&D, right? So at the time, like, uh, there there were no monster races to speak of that we knew of. You know, we didn't have our hands on
Yeah.
the same source material that everybody else did. And so it was incredibly novel and interesting, um, and it just got stuck in there. And, you know, keep in mind, this was, you know, let's say 5, 6 years before Blizzard came out with Warcraft, right? So,
Yeah, we're
uh,
talking Warcraft, not World of Warcraft. We're
right,
talking like
exactly.
orcs
Original
versus
orcs
humans. Yeah,
versus humans. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Right. And so, you know, it was, I mean, you know, in hindsight, I feel like we were kind of innovating things that if we had had the resources and the skills, we could have done something with, right? But so yeah, the orcs got stuck in my head, and they were just there, and we didn't run another game like that, and it kind of disappeared into the vault of my mind, and you know, that was it for a good long while. Fast forward a couple of years, we're all playing this LARP called Daga here with a bunch of people that we knew in our hometown and in Nashville, uh, and we were doing, you know, we'd kind of gotten wrapped up in their particular flavor of LARPing politics, if that's even a thing. And so there was a lot of like, you know, when we first got into it, I thought it was pretty interesting RP and politicking and factions and, you know, intrigue. And that's what
hmm
it seemed like when we started. But the further along we went with it, the less it seemed like what I think at the time we had established as like some pretty fun and deep role playing for ourselves. And turned out to be more of kind of you know, kind of mundane,
yeah.
cliquish, um,
Role play
uh,
light.
right, role play light, and really more about you know, real life factions, groups of people who knew each other in real
Right.
life, and it started to get pretty discouraging for me. Um, and so at the time, you guys were running a guild called the Black Rose, and things were getting pretty buck wild there. And I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. And that's when I decided to retire the character that I had at the time and do something new. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And then suddenly I had the memory of that one shot and that orc, and I thought nothing could be further from what we're doing right now than playing an orc, which is what I did. I retired the old character. I made this
Yeah.
orc. He didn't have a name. At the time, I didn't think he needed one. And I started just doing it, just RPing on the field. And then I started trying to recruit you guys into it. And pretty soon, the entire group, there's like 6 or 7 of us, are all playing these just this big mob of orcs. And it didn't take very long for us to realize we need to start doing some character development here and kind of like staking our claim on the field and in the RP that happens, you know, in this LARP. And so everybody started naming their characters, and that's where more or less where Soong came from. Now he didn't really get his actual name until a bit later, but this was kind of like the birth of the character, more or less, kind of in homage to that original character Wardar. Um, and it was a blast. And our friend Grim, who we still call him Grim, that was his orc name. Like I don't even ever call him by his character or his real name anymore. It's always his character name. We had a blast doing it, and that lasted for a couple of years. And I think we had a pretty big impact on that group because of that. And then there was Soong. He was just there. He was just kind of like this alter ego that was delightful to pull out at all the wrong times. And he kind of and you asked about this before we started. He and I were kind of a opposite sides of a coin. I got to be in Soong, who I didn't get to be in everyday life, and say the things I wanted to say that you can't really say in everyday life, and that kind of started to create the character that he was. And then like the next stage was you and I deciding to really flesh these characters out when we moved away and started our new group in the LARP community. And so we really went to town on like developing backstories for these characters and developing some rudimentary language for them. I think we kind of borrowed or cribbed some of the Klingon language stuff to come up with like our proper names and whatnot. And that was kind of the beginning of Soong, the fully realized character that would continue on
Right.
from there. And he, at that time, I believe, I finally came to the decision that this is Soong, a war priest of Grumish. And his full name was Soong Toiwei, or in the Orcish, it would be Soong Toiwei. And that means slave of Soong. And there's an entire backstory about
Yeah.
how this character was actually the slave of a great war chief, and the war chief's name was Soong, and thus Soong Toiwei is actually slave of Soong in Orcish. And so we played those characters. I played Soong for years in the LARP until I finally retired from it. And then there was a pretty long stretch of years where I had retired from LARPing. I had run out of patience for kind of like the tabletop RPG community,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a lot of other things on my mind. I was an adult now, professional development and other life pursuits got in the way, and once again the orcs fade away. But then when I met my girlfriend, my soon-to-be wife, at the time, her and her friends asked if I would run a D&D game for them, and I really was feeling very rusty and very out of my element, but I decided, sure, I'll go for it. And in one of our very first adventures, uh, all new players, they didn't really know what they were doing. They were prone to making all sorts of fantastic and hilarious errors, and they wound up in a scenario where it was going to be a total party kill. But it just so happened that prior to them walking into the dungeon, I was out of content, and they were kind of like milking the pre-dungeon role play for additional stuff, just having a good time. And they're like, well, we when we cross over the through the forest and we get to the mouth of the cave, what do we see? And I'm like, well, I want to give them something because they're looking. And I'm like, well, I don't know. You see an old and bedraggled looking orc sitting next to the cave entrance, and he's cooking. And I know anyone who's played for any amount of time, and especially dungeon masters, know if you randomly create a one-off NPC that you have no background on, no intention of actually doing anything with, and certainly no character voice or any kind of personality, your players are absolutely going to glom onto that NPC and like force you to come up
Yeah,
with
that's
stuff on
right.
the spot, and then that
What's
NPC is
that
going to
guy's
become
name?
their,
What's that guy's
oh,
name? What's that
where's
guy's
he
name?
from? What's he doing? Tell us all about where you're from and what your motivations are, random orc in front of a cave. And I'm like, oh no, they're falling in love with this random orc NPC I put there. And so I just pulled Soong out of my back pocket. I'm like, it's just Soong. It has to be Soong because I know I can pull this one off. And so literally the entire session gets completely halted for the rest of the night as they RP with old Soong. Right, Soong is now an old guy for by Orcish standards, and he is more or less there to warn them, hey, don't go in that cave. And they say, no, we're definitely going in that cave. We got to stop the bad guy from doing the thing. And he's like, all right, but I'm telling you, it's a dangerous cave. I wouldn't go in there, and I'm way more experienced than you. Trust me. He's like, whatever. And they go in, and they almost TPK because one of the players decided to jump on an exploding rune, and so they're all laid out, and this was a 3.5, so uh, death saves were a little complicated, and I didn't even want to start going into that. So I was lucky. Soong was there. He was outside the cave. He hears the noise. He comes into the cave because he's concerned about these adventurers that he just tried to warn off. And so at that moment, Soong became canon to uh, my entire um, expanded D&D game universe, which had initially just been the campaign that I ran for you and a couple of our other friends way back in the day, like 93, 94, the Demon Tower series, right? And so I just added him to the continuum. And every game that I've run since then, the idea of him being kind of like this glue that holds all of these disparate campaigns and story arcs together uh, created this world that is, separate campaigns, separate stories, separate groups of adventurers, but a similar multiverse, right? Not even necessarily same planes or same planets, but an entire multiverse where Soong is this reoccurring constant. And so every group that I run and every full campaign arc that I manage to get off the ground, he shows up at some point. Uh, and I at one point had decided I was very concerned about him being some kind of like Mary Sue character, and I didn't want that to be the case. I
Right.
wanted him to be more like, kind of how Medivh is in World of Warcraft and the Warcraft series. Um, kind of a deeply flawed figure who's made a lot of mistakes and
Right.
has a lot of baggage and is by no means a hero, but he's someone who might be able to help the players, um, even if it's kind of a monkey paw situation where they may find him and ask him for something and they may get it, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily always exactly how they thought it would be. And so,
It's
yeah,
sort of
that
like a for those of you who are Brandon Sanderson fans, maybe Hoyd, or what's he called? Hoyd is kind of his multiverse name, but yeah, he kind of shows up. He's kind of flawed. He might help, he might not.
right,
It's not like he's always like the savior or yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think I probably started that way, but I'm self-conscious about stuff like that, and so I kind of doubled back to make sure that that's who he was, as opposed to some kind of savior every time the PCs get into a jam like he was that first time, which was
Right.
blind luck.
Right.
And so, additionally, because I have such history with him, I have not been able to help but make him my primary character in literally every video game that will let you play an orc or a half orc, and you have character creation sliders. Like I always wind up with Soong again, like you have in your background there.
Yeah.
That's Soong from Skyrim, from the Elder Scrolls series, and he just keeps coming back, man, and he's like this little voice in the
So
back of my head, and he never leaves, and he's like, "All right, what are you doing now? What are we playing tonight, Matt?" I'm like, "Well, Soong, I don't know, but I guess it's
so
you and me."
so it does sound one of my questions here because I'm going to back up a little bit
Sure.
is about uh, kind of what in your life contributed to making him a part of you, right? What is it that and you said a little bit about this. You said he gave you a voice to some things that you couldn't say in real life because you were in a character. But what is it that yeah what is it that it helps or brings this character for you as a person?
Yeah, yeah. I think a whole lot of it, and at least this is the part I identify with most because uh, he, I guess we've kind of informed each other's character. I think it might be a good way to say that. We were in our early 20s at that time when we started RPing them on the field, and we were dealing with a bunch of people who wanted to kind of recreate um, like a formal medieval society. And there were all these rules and all these ideas about what it took to be accepted and how you should act and speak and who you should get along with. And there's a lot of I don't know. I don't know really how to put it, but it really rubbed me the wrong way. And so I thought I can't keep doing this. I have to be who I am and act like I want to act. And I still want to be involved in this community, and I want to do it in a way that's fun for me too. Not everybody can be a lord or a lady. Not everybody can have the patience to create those good graces and speak in that manner and act in that way. And so, for me, the thing that I think that I did for Soong was I gave life to the part of me that just wanted to say what he thought, act how he wanted to act, be around who he wanted to be, and to hell with other people's opinions. And then Soong in turn gave me permission to be more like that in real life because I got a lot of practice on the field. And you remember all of this.
Yeah.
It was a blast kind of to poke fun at all of those all of those traditions that those people were trying to make and how stifling and stiff it all felt. And so then that in turn allowed me to be more of that person in my day-to-day life as I grew up and became an adult. And I think people, and this is just my opinion, but I think people are better off um, being accepting of themselves for who they are and not trying to change the things that make them who they are. Of course, everybody has character flaws they need to work on, but if you don't feel like dressing a certain way or acting a certain way or being around certain types of people, then good, don't do it. And that's what Soon gave me. And so yeah, I think that's kind of the long and short of it. It was permission to be myself, and then of course Soon gave me, and then this last thing I'll say about him is he gave me an opportunity to really like dig into some creative writing and some creative role playing that was kind of out of my experience, which I think led me to be a better DM and a better player in the long run. Yeah, so that's that.
So let's dig in a little bit about Soong himself, his backstory, and what what is it that because you said he's kind of a flawed character that comes back. You said he was a slave at one point. So let's talk about what was it, an event in his life that kind of changed him and made him kind of the old flawed old orc that you like to throw into your games.
Yeah, I mean, I think at his roots he's flawed because he's an orc. He's uncultured and racist and prone to fits of rage, which he does not try to control. I mean, if you compare him to others of his kind, um, he is not much different from them in temperament and attitude. The benefit he has is that he's smarter than they are. And so I think a lot of his flaws just come from his orcish heritage that he has no interest in giving up. I've had friends compare him to Driz Duerden, which really really offends me. Because I'm pretty sure he predates Driz, but also because I don't consider him to be an introspective and and heroic character. But he is not a bad character either, right? I think Soong is very much in a spectrum of gray, uh, and so yeah, that always bugs me a little bit. I mean, Soong is very flawed because he's not a good guy, and his motivations for doing good things aren't because he's a good guy. And so in any given situation, he's not necessarily going to do the right thing or be a hero. He's going to do what is most in his self interest. And additionally, he's got some very deep seated psychological issues from all the trauma that he's gone through in his life. He's lost a lot of what he would consider very good friends along the way, and he is a lonely guy, right? and so he can get a little grumpy. Even with the people that he's trying to help, he can get a little grumpy, and it can be a little hard to determine whether or not this, massive, terrifying, scarred up orc is actually here to help you, or what's going on. If I were forced to make some kind of comparison between him and something in a Salvatore book, I'd think he was probably closer to oh, help me out here, the rogue that Entreri runs with, the dark elf with the big floppy hat.
Oh, Jarlaxle.
Yeah, I think he's probably more like Jaraxle. But yeah, so I guess I'll kind of expand on that with a little more of his background, and maybe that will help clarify some of the things I just said. So, and of course, this is all stuff you already know because you were there. Soong was originally the one of a pair of slaves of this very successful orc warlord named Soong. As I stated earlier, his name was actually Slave of Soong, and he was raised alongside a wild elf who was the other slave, and his name was
Soong
Soong
Such.
Such, right?
Pet. Pet.
Soong Such, pet of Soong, slave of Soong, and pet of Soong. And the two of them grew up together. And Soong Toi Wei was very enamored with his master. He, coming from orc culture, it was pretty common to become a slave. What was not unexpected, and you just took it as your lot. And so he idolized his master, the warlord Soong. Eventually, Soong winds up replacing the warlord and becomes Soong the Second. He becomes the warmonger, or which is a similar title, and leads that same tribe on to a huge crusade of orcs against all the goodly races, and was fairly successful. And in his old age, much like his master was, he realizes that his time is done. But for whatever reason, no orc has been able to replace him. Whenever a new and young and stronger challenger comes along, Soong bests him, and so Soong decides to leave the tribe and go off on his spirit quest, more or less. He goes to find Groomish. He goes to find Groomish and say, "All right, I came up as a slave. I replaced the warlord. I became a warlord. We had this great crusade in your name. We did a lot of work for you." But here I am. I'm still alive. I've not had the, and though orcs don't use the word honor and don't understand the meaning of it. Like I've not been blessed by you to die in battle. And so it is at that point during his spirit quest that he is confronted by this image or this avatar of Groomish, and is cursed by him. I believe that Groomish decided that he was going to recruit Soong as one of his earthly avatars, and he curses him. He lays the iron spear on his forehead and tells him, "Until the world knows no more people than my orcs, you will never die or age. No sickness will lay you low, no wound will strike you down. You are my witness, and I bind you to me forever. You will never see the Iron Fortress till the final night has settled on Earth." And what Groomish means by that is you have to stay around until orcs rule the world, and you cannot come to the Iron Fortress, which is Groomish's version of heaven, until that happens. Um, and I believe at first Soong thought that that was a good deal. But Soong's been around for a really long time now, and I think he's figured out that's probably never going to happen. He has come to terms with the idea that all the goodly races combined will always be able to defeat his people because his people aren't organized enough or smart enough or clever enough to overcome those odds. And so Groomish, in the beginning, Soong thought he was blessed, but it turns out he was cursed. Groomish has done this to him. He knows that that means he will wander forever, and he's really mad about it. And so what happens is in this arc, Soong his relationship with his god sours, right? And he continues his quest as Grumish has commanded, and he roams the lands and he looks for signs that the orcs are gaining power, and he tries to help when he can. Um, but alongside of that, he's also started to kind of despise his god and rebel against this idea. And so, what he does to enact that rebellion is that he helps the goodly races when they're in need. If he wanders upon like a group of adventurers who are about to go into a dungeon they can't handle, he sits at the cave entrance and he waits. And when they show up, he says, "Don't go in there. You're gonna die." And then he goes in and heals them when they're all laying there unconscious, bleeding out. Um, and he seeks out this heroic life in spite of his God's demands, and he does wrestle with the identity of it. Um, but the truth of the matter is that he is still an orc, and he does want to see his people succeed. And though he despises his God, he still obeys the command. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's the smallest nutshell I can come up with as to why Soong is the kind of I want to say like tragic hero, but maybe a tragic anti-hero. Uh, but I will finish with this. Regardless of all of that, he is still just an orc. He rejects law and order, politics, society, pleasantries, in favor of those raw and real experiences that he craves: battle, adventure, um, exploration, danger. Of course, because Grumish has cursed him with this immortality, that can get a little boring when you know there's no inherent risk, which is another facet of kind of his how he has soured to his god and his quest.
Right. All right. Well, let me browse through my. I didn't have to guide you very much. You made this interview very easy for me. Um, so, um, before we get into the RP session, just a little bit about using Soong. So, if somebody wants to, if they're like, "Wow, I really like this idea of this old orc war chief type character who's cursed by Grumish," and what are some things that if I was a DM doing this or game mastering this, um, what is it that what could I do? What could be some of those player hooks, right? So if I was going to
Yeah,
meet Soong, where might I meet him? What might he ask me to do? And what things might what are some hooks that we could kind of throw their way?
sure. Tell you what, I think I have some notes on that one in particular, and I'll pull that up. I thought I already had it up, but there we go.
And then while he's looking that up, I just have to point out, I get to the right part here, that I'm doing it backwards. This symbol right here. Do you recognize that symbol?
Oh, oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
That's your the old Bones and Runes game that you developed a couple of years ago,
yep,
right?
yep. And on one of those runes
Oh,
is
I
the
see it.
symbol of the
Yes, that's
Jurga.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Jurga. So the not super long lived chapter of the Dagger Hero LARP that we used to play that we established in Boulder. Yeah, the Jurga was I think some of our best work.
Yeah, and
Um,
when you talked about Soong's like quest to before he the like basically trying to destroy all the other races in the world, and the Jurga is kind of like that
that's it.
promise of Grumish, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
their
that's
symbol,
exactly right.
their
That's
symbol.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Jurga is in our canon, the Orcish legend, and it's kind of cribbed from the original description of Grumish himself. Was that one day my people, who the other gods have failed, which I think there's some probably. probably some pretty deep allegory there
Yeah.
if you dig deep enough. Like you failed my people, like you gave them table scraps and we're mad, and eventually we're going to come back and take what's ours. And the Jurga is that promise, as Grumish saying, one day I will send a messenger and he will gather all the orcs under one banner, and they will take the world back from the goodly races, as it was stolen from them so long ago. Yeah, that's fantastic. That was a really fun time. It was like an opportunity to really flesh out the lore and do some real writing, which I don't really think you see a lot in the game anymore. I feel like a lot of those LARPs have kind of degraded into stick fighting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more Eskrima than RP anymore. Yeah, that's fantastic. I still have a lot of that stuff crammed in the closet here somewhere.
All right. So
Um,
what are
but
some
yeah,
player
just
hooks?
sure. Wrapping back to that, I think so. Soong doesn't know this, but Soong is a couple of thousand years old. And the reason he doesn't know this is because what happens is that from time to time he will get into trouble deep enough that it more or less obliterates his physical being. But he, you know, and his spirit travels up to the Iron Fortress and bounces off, and Grimace throws him back down, and he doesn't always necessarily end up landing in the same world or the same plane. And Soong has stories about how, you know, one time he woke up and he existed for about 2.5 seconds because he was in the plane of fire, and he didn't know it until it was too late, and he burned to a crisp, and then he, you know, slammed down again. And so Soong has been around for a long time and has seen a lot of really weird stuff because he has not been uh, he has not been anchored to the prime material. He just ends up wherever, as Grumish just kind of hucks him into the ether, and he winds up wherever he is. And sometimes that's Elysium, and sometimes that's the Forgotten Realms, and sometimes it's my, you know, current campaign, which is like a gothic horror adventure, and there's Soong again, you know. And so he's seen a lot, he knows a lot, and and so it makes him a really interesting character to go to uh, for information that the players might not otherwise have. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of time that information is tainted, and so what the players might walk away with, while technically the truth may hold enough nuggets of misinformation to mislead them into situations that make things worse for them instead of better. As I was talking earlier, kind of that monkey paw situation. Aside from that, Soong also knows all sorts of things he shouldn't, because this thousands of years of plane hopping has kind of infused him with magic that he doesn't understand, and so he has kind of like a third eye. And so he can look at a party member of an adventuring group that comes to him and know things about their lives that he couldn't possibly know, but that could send that player on a number of different adventures that they might not have otherwise stumbled upon. And I think that's really the thing that I like most about him as a like an adventure hook, is that he can say to someone, um, I'm sorry for your loss. And the player's like, what do you mean? I haven't lost anybody. He's like, no, you haven't yet, but your mother is going to die in a week. The caravan that she's traveling on will be raided by bandits, and she'll be one of the casualties. And so then the player's like, oh no, you know, we got to drop what we're doing and go find out where that caravan's going, and, you know, and stop the bandits from attacking. You know, something simple for a low level adventure. Of course, that can scale up indefinitely. Like especially when you start talking about campaigns that are based on high level characters with a lot of politics and intrigue and you know, dark dealings. Um, it's a way to, and I always find this a little difficult, to give players information that they might not go digging for themselves. And so I think that's probably the thing I like to use him for most. He's
Yeah.
kind of like an all-seeing seer, but not necessarily a very helpful one.
Right, cryptic messages and yeah. I mean, some of your examples were very direct, right? But how he knows them isn't right,
Right.
and it might not be. The other part of that, right, is that it might not actually be who the character knows is their mother. It could be some
Sure.
other motherly figure that they find out died in a caravan.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. A lot of especially what I'm doing these days is, it's a fairly low level party. It's about, well, it's four characters. Only one of the players has previous experience with the game. And so there's a lot of instances where, once again, any DM worth their salt has experienced this 100 times, where you lay out an adventure hook for your players and they just walk right past it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they're not used to doing the investigative stuff, or they do something as silly as fail a roll that you expected them. They critically fail a perception check. Well, there goes that hook. you know I think NPCs who just have them laid out, it's like, hey, I'm coming straight to you and telling you this thing. Whatever you want to do with it is what you do with it, but now you have the information and you can't get away from it.
Right, right,
The thing that can't be unseen.
and that's kind of the my one of the things that I tell all new GMs that come to me is, don't let the dice ruin your story. If
Absolutely.
they need to find a secret door, let them find the secret door.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Yep. Yep. And yeah, that I definitely, my personal ethos around DMing is, I want to tell a collective story. I want it to be good, and I want you to have a really good time. And everybody's had those nights where you just get like a batch of critical fails, and or you as the DM are rolling like critical hit after critical hit, and that starts to make the game slow down and make it less fun. And so it's like every once in a while it's okay to fudge those dice or to just give something away. And so I'm all on board for that. And Soong is a great way to do that as well, because you just say, listen, this is, here it is. You don't have to investigate this. You don't have to roll, and it's things that nobody else knows.
right. All right. Well, I think we're going to take a break and come back in about 5 minutes and do an RP and meet um, Old Soon.
Great.